I'm sorry. I want to let the board know, beginning tonight, we will welcome to the public watching our board work session via Microsoft Skype. We are using the Skype platform to broadcast the meeting, but will not be accepting comments through Skype. The Skype meeting videos will be archived on OWASA's YouTube page. Please see our website at www.awasa.org under the Board of Directors meeting page for more information on that. I'd like to make an announcement that John Young and Heather Payne, board members, will be absent this evening, and we're expecting a Rushir for in about 10 or 15 minutes. Okay, does any board member know of any conflict of interest or potential conflict of interest with respect to any item on the agenda tonight? See none. Also, without objection, the board will reschedule the closed session for the purpose of discussing a personnel matter until the December 14th, 2017 work session that was scheduled for this evening. Also, I think we want to congratulate Barbara Fouché, who was elected to the Carver Board of Aldermen on Tuesday. She will join the board in December. Congratulations. Highest vote getter, first time she ran for office. That's amazing. Congratulations.
So people want Barbara.
So it seems.
Okay. Also, Tuesday, December 5th, 2017, the Natural Resources and Technical Service Committee meeting will be held at 4:30 in the OWASA boardroom to discuss two projects, biogas to energy and drought planning and response. Okay, now announcements by other board members. Barbara, you had one?
Yeah. So the Human Resources Committee is scheduled to meet at 5:30 on November 16, 2017 in the OWASA boardroom. The agenda will include compensation strategies for the performance period of October 2017 through September 2018. We will also discuss retiree health benefits for new hires as well as deferred compensation 457 plan.
Thank you. Does any other board members have any announcements? John?
Yesterday I was talking to Barry Gullett, who's the longtime manager of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg water system. I'm sure Ed knows him. He's an outstanding leader in our profession. And it just happened to come up that we're dealing with an issue of concern about fluorides here. And Barry told me that in Charlotte-Mecklenburg, they've taken the same direction that we're headed toward ourselves, and that is to ask the help of the county health department to assemble an appropriate team to review the medical and scientific data to make a recommendation on that. So I just mentioned that because that may be a source of advice for us as we proceed. It sounds like they
thought for a long time, and maybe too long, about whether to make that request. In hindsight, it seems like an staff. Really confident that we're really well positioned to execute the plan that's in front of us. And one of the reasons I have that confidence is we started Allison Reinert at the beginning of October as a utilities engineer, and Allison comes to us with excellent background for the position. She got her undergraduate at Southern Methodist University and did graduate level work at NC State, including some work at the Jones Ferry water treatment plant. And then following that, she worked at the consulting firm of Hazen and Sawyer, and then most recently at Orange County. And so she's been with us since the beginning of October, just doing a tremendous job. She's somebody who she gets things done, and on top of that, she's just a pleasure to work with. So I'm pleased to have her on my team, and OWASA as a whole is really benefiting from adding her to the organization. So Allison Reiner, our new utilities engineer.
Great. Thank you, Vishnu, and thank you, board members. I do really appreciate the opportunity to come and work for OWASA. It's been a great organization. Even when I had started and done the grad work over there in the basement of Jones Ferry water treatment plant, I knew that this was a good place to work, and everybody's been very welcoming, and it feels, very family oriented, and Ed does a great job of welcoming all of the new staff members, and so does Vishnu in the capital improvements program, and every single staff member I've met. So everyone's great. So thank you again.
Allison, welcome to the team.
Thank you.
Ed, you have an announcement?
Yeah, just a quick word about the open house we had last Saturday, November 4th. We were very pleased with the turnout. We didn't count, but we estimated maybe 300 to 400 people, and we were really pleasantly surprised about the number of people that took us up on the offer to tour the water treatment plant. We estimate somewhere between 120, 150 people took a tour of the Jones Ferry Road water treatment plant. So we were very pleased with that, and then internally, as we often do, we're going to have an after-action review about both open house events and what went well, what might be improved, and we also welcome your feedback on that. Also, as far as what frequency we might want to consider such events in the future, and possibly at the wastewater plant or at other facilities. So really proud of our team, all the work they put into preparing that, and it was especially satisfying to see how much our team enjoyed doing all what they did to prepare and then at the events themselves. So thank you.
Jeff?
Yeah, just want to say, Ed and staff, I had a chance to go to both the events and enjoyed them both, but I was just particularly taken at the recent one on the 4th of the employees who were running the stations. It's just walking by, like grabbing them to come over here, Kim, come let me show you this, and talking about what they do and why it's important with such enthusiasm. Just really was a great day, and including the enormous toilet.
Which we didn't use OWASA ratepayers' money. The city of Raleigh was gracious enough to let us borrow the large inflatable toilet and the mascot running toilet that you saw about. And we didn't realize we had 3 employees that enjoyed being inside a toilet as much as they. In fact, one of them is here tonight, Kelly Satterfield, one of 3 running toilets.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Okay. Announcements on the agenda. The first agenda item is position reclassification for a new safety and risk manager. Stephanie Glasgow.
Hello. So 3 retirements in the finance department allowed us the opportunity to make improvements to the assignment of responsibilities. There were 2 hires and 1 promotion, and that left us with a vacant accounting technician 1 position. It was determined that the organization was better served with the position of safety and risk manager that would report in the Human Resources Department. This position would be directly responsible for the overall management and administration of OWASA safety and risk management program. Having a designated full-time professional will enhance our safety initiatives and allow existing human resources staff to focus on diversity and inclusion, compensation and benefit strategies, and of course, recruitment and retention. So the packet that you have in front of you provides detailed information about the tasks for the position, and it includes a job description. As per our board-approved pay administration guidelines, we use our job evaluation process to determine a salary grade, and we also looked outside of the organization and polled the area entities as to their positions. The board's Human Resource Committee has discussed this and reviewed all the information, and they support reclassifying the accounting technician 1 position to Safety and Risk Manager, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Let's see if the public has any questions first. I don't see any. John?
I had a couple of questions and a couple of comments. How would the public or board members know what the safety record is at OWASA? I mean, is there any, we've gotten an email one time before that there's no summary of accidents or injuries that's easily accessible to the board.
It is on our KPI report, and we think with the addition of this position, we would be able to provide additional information. We have our OSHA logs, but I'm not quite sure that was the information that you may be looking for. And I saw the email that you had sent.
Well, just, I really have no idea what kind of safety or accident history there is here at OWASA. And, of course, I'm brand new. But I think it would be very valuable to have very prompt reports on accidents when they happen. That may happen already in a very simple form. And I think it would be very useful for board members and probably for anyone who's concerned to have a summary of the kinds of accidents that occur and where they occur and, what might be the cause. Because, one of the key things about reducing accidents is to get a good map of how and where they happen. And the more eyes that can look at that, the more good ideas you may have about how to remedy that problem. So when I look at the position description, I don't see that kind of accident reporting is very prominent here. There's one phrase that may suggest that, but I would suggest that the job description have a little more detailed item in there that talks about preparing a summary report of what the safety and accident history at OWASA is. And just looking over the qualifications that are required, in terms of experience and education, it mentions broad knowledge in a general professional or technical field. That sounds very broad. That could cover almost anything. Would it be wise to say that it would be a priority to find someone with some experience in safety management? I don't know whether you don't want to make it too narrow because you might not find exactly the person, but I think it would be good to have something in the job requirements to have some experience or training in the safety field. And one other thing I noticed down under writing, it says you need basic ability to write simple sentences containing subject, verb, and object. That may be a little too low a target because if this person is going to do some of the other tasks that are required, like analyzing comprehensive reports, preparing reports, I think, we need to shoot a little higher than that, I think, for writing skill. Those are just a couple of comments.
And I can explain that to you. So under job requirements, we have a job evaluation manual, and it's weighted factors. And so for formal education all the way down through I think it is the writing category, there's a selection that the hiring supervisor would make, and it determines what pay grade the position would be in. So that language is very similar for each and every position based on how they were ranked. So you'll see that same exact language for a lot of our positions. Some a little bit higher, some a little bit lower.
Ed?
And I would add, this isn't what we'd advertised either.
Right.
I mean, we would sharpen an advertisement certainly to include some of the good points that you made as far as, the duties and responsibilities and the experiences and background we're looking for. So, this is more of a detailed job description that stays in-house. But again, our recruitment ad would be tailored along the lines you're suggesting.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Jeff?
Yeah, so I just echo some earlier comments I've made at other meetings. I'm pleased to see us move in this direction. I think having an employee specifically focused on safety is a good thing for an operating environment like this, and for a lot of our staff, particularly the staff out in the field that work in jobs that have, could result in injuries. I think this renewed focus, as we come through with the employee, you'll be looking, at least as long as I'm on the board, for us to continue to look at driving down our TRR. I'd like to see, OWASA gets lots of accolades for other aspects. I'd like to see, an OWASA staff member reporting somewhere at a meeting where our TRR drops below 1, which is what I'm more accustomed to in operating environments. So I'm glad we're moving in this direction.
Thank you.
Any other board comments? Okay, we need approval of the resolution on page 1.7 to amend the schedule of employee classification and authorize compensation to reclassify an accounting technician 1 position to a safety and risk manager position.
Per my earlier comment, I'd be happy to move that resolution.
All right, Jeff. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Yinka. Okay, and I wanted to say John Young wanted me to indicate that he supported this resolution. But all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those nay. The ayes have it.
Thank you so very much.
Okay, the second agenda item is the financial report for a 3-month period ending September 30th, 2017. Stephen Winters, Director of Finance and Customer Service, will provide a PowerPoint presentation.
Thank you. So the financial report, that's in more detail than what I'm going to present, begins on page 10.1 of your packet. And one thing I always like to point out is that we are meeting all of our financial management.
Excuse me, that's an old number.
Oh, is it? I'm sorry. What's the, oh, it's 2.1. Sorry, this was on the agenda last time and my notes had the wrong page number. So we are meeting all of our financial management policy requirements. And so I'm just going to go through a few highlights here. For the first 3 months of the year, the first quarter, we brought in $9.7 million in water and sewer revenue. We had budgeted $10 million, so that's about $320,000 less than what we had budgeted. Drinking water sold on an average million gallons per day basis was 6.4 versus 6.7 million gallons per day projected. Customer fees, which are system development fees, essentially, was right on budget for the quarter. Operating expenses, we were about $491,000 under budget. That's not that unusual for the first 3 months of the year. We try to allocate the budget across the months with some intelligence, but it's hard to predict. So I don't expect that under budget situation to last the whole year. And then our net income, when you take all of that information we just mentioned, was about $211,000 over budget, or 5.8%. CIP expenditures, we were about $288,000 under what we had projected to spend. That's about 10%. And Vishnu's here that he can answer any of the specific questions that are not answered in the packet of material. I'll go into a little bit more detail about the individual departments and the where we are in the operating expenses there. General administrative expenses, we were about $266,000 under budget. The biggest part of that is consulting projects that we just have not incurred the expenses on yet. The diversity and inclusion is in there, and off the top of my head, I don't remember the others, but that's the majority of that. And Ray had asked me a question earlier, not to rat you out for asking the question, but some of the others, somebody may either not know or not remember that general administration includes the executive director's department, which includes sustainability and things like that, engineering and planning, customer service, HR, finance, and IT. In the water supply and treatment, we were about $33,000 under budget. That's pretty close on $1.5 million. In each of these departments, we were under budget, mostly because of we just haven't spent maintenance, haven't incurred maintenance expenses that we had budgeted yet. About $33,000 on under budget on water distribution, about that $117,000 under on wastewater treatment. In addition to maintenance, we were a little bit under budget on energy in the wastewater treatment plant. And then in wastewater collection, we were under budget by about $43,000. As is mentioned in the agenda material, we were budgeted to spend $15.1 million in capital improvements projects this year. We were a little under budget or under projections for the first 3 months, but for the entire year, right now, we're projecting that we'll be a little bit over budget, 15.9 million. And as you may recall, our target is to be anywhere from 90% to 105% of our budget. So this is just a summary of the things that I've already mentioned. So be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions by the board? Jeff, and then Ray?
Go ahead.
So just two things, Stephen. So the graphs on page 2.6, which are operating expense and energy costs per 1,000 gallons of water treated. I do like that data very much, but I'd like to recommend that we rescale the graph. You'll see, the data is too similar, and all the bars are the same.
It doesn't change much.
And because we pump, so if you rescale the y-axis, I think this would be a lot more, useful to look at. I think the underlying data is important, but it's hard to see from the graph.
Okay.
And then just two comments on 2.7, and you can kick this to Vishnu if you want, although I'll expect him to play piano while answering. We've been making some comments as a board over the last couple of years about falling below our CIP expenditure. So I see, through Q1 we're on track. So good to see that, and probably related to the fact that we have appropriate resourcing. However, given the recent email we got about some one of our vendors on AMI backing out of the project, I'm assuming that's going to slow us down. I just wondered if that was going to impact our projection of spend for the year.
That's more of a pilot question.
Which would be understandable if that were the case.
We don't expect that to impact the budget.
Okay.
To be honest with you, it's going to delay the start of the project, but we've gotten the slack in the schedule to be able to overcome that. So I figure that we're going to be right on target with our expenditures on AMI unless we get another
Okay.
snag.
Thank you.
Can I ask him a clarifying? And are you
Sure,
talking
you're the
about
boss.
this fiscal year or the project
Yeah,
in
that's-
total?
Yeah, which
Talking
amount?
about this fiscal year.
Yeah, so you think we'll still be
I
okay
still
this
think we're
fiscal?
going to
Okay,
hit our
thank you.
budget target for this year. Good question.
All right, I'll check again next quarter.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, make a note.
All right,
I'll remember.
Ray?
I was just curious are the quarterly budget amounts just simply 25% of the annual budget?
No,
They're actually prorated.
Yeah, so
Based on-
it's a little bit all across the board depending on the line item. Some of it are tied to water production, historical water production. Some are, I look back at the last several years of when we spent money on X or Y and allocate it based on that. And yet even with all of, some of that intelligence baked in, it's hard to predict, especially earlier in the year.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay, any other, John?
Stephen, I was looking at the graph about care to share, which is on page 211. Maybe I'm not reading this right, but it looks like I guess this is monthly amount of money raised is $450 approximately.
Yes,
And you have 1,050 people donating.
yes.
That's like less than 50 cents a person.
Yeah, you may remember that the program started out being a roundup. So your bill's $40.50, you contribute 50 cents. And most of the contributors are in that roundup.
Okay, that explains it then.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, no action is needed, but is there any other feedback or questions that the board has? Okay. I guess we can go on now to item number 3, annual review and update of strategic trends and utility planning issues and strategic plan progress report. Ruth Rouse, Planning and Development Manager, will make a presentation. Hey, Ruth.
All right, thank you. All right, so this is an annual report that we do. And what we're looking at is looking at trends in what's happening throughout our system, from raw water up through, wastewater treatment. So what we're looking at is how is growth in the service area, how does it impact our demands on like raw water supply and our treatment plant and other infrastructure? We're also looking at things like environmental regulations. We want to get out in front of those that we see might be coming down the pipeline, and other things that we don't really have control over, such as climate change. And by thinking about these things and looking at them systematically, it allows us to anticipate and proactively prepare for those changes that might be coming down the pipeline. So if we do need to expand one of our plants, we can get that permitting and design and in place before we actually need the capacity. So what we're going to see this evening, and it is in the report, is that we do believe that we'll meet our raw water demands under most conditions. We do have Jordan Lake out there as an insurance policy that we can use if we get into an extended drought or also in an operational emergency. The first task that we'll be doing in the long-range water supply plan that I was hoping would come to you in December, but that's been delayed to March, is that we'll be updating those demand projections. We also don't anticipate that we're going to have to expand the capacity of either of our treatment plants for at least the next 20 years. And that raw water supply, as well as that treatment capacity, really is the result of some hard work by our customers. They've really increased their conservation and water use efficiency, and also, the work that UNC did with us to put the reclaimed water system in line in 2009. That meets about 10% of our water needs in the community now. So I'm going to start and just kind of take us through some of the highlights. We'll start with raw water supply and then work through water treatment and then wastewater. I'm going to build this graph. It shows what our estimated yield is, and this does not include our allocation from Jordan Lake. That would bump the line up about 5 MGD. This assumes that it's based on the drought of record, so that was 2002 for us. So there is some conservatism built in that line. It also assumes that we want to reserve about 20% of our raw water storage. So that buys us some time that we do have access to the Haw River, that we could get out there and put in an emergency intake out there and get that pumped to us. So that gives us time to do that. So over time, you can see,
Can I ask a question? The Haw River supply, the city of Greensboro also takes water out of the Haw River, excuse me. And that's a small body of water. Can both jurisdictions take water out of there without any getting? Because I know we were concerned about the height of the water and maintaining a certain amount of flow.
Yeah, so my understanding is that during the last drought in 2008, that we actually went out and looked at places in the Haw River and selected a place that we thought would be good to put in a temporary intake in. So we actually have an agreement with that landowner that to be able to do that. We pay him an annual like $2,000 a year as kind of insurance. And my understanding is that they did go in and talk to the Division of Water Resources to find out, could we do that in an emergency basis? So they have had conversations with the state.
Yeah, and I would add that we also believe there would be, sufficient flow. It's, of course, in a drought, it was very low, but even at the worst part of the drought of 2008, there's still a reasonable amount of flow in the Haw River at that location. And again, this would be kind of the worst case scenario. We certainly, since 2007, 2008, and, we have a reclaimed water system in place now. And of course, Ray DeBose and Meg and others were an important part of doing that. And we also have the level 1 allocation of Jordan Lake secured now. And we still, of course, have the mutual aid agreement. So, I think, Jordan Lake, and at the worst part of the drought in 07, 08, the water supply pool was full or nearly full in Jordan Lake, when some of the other area reservoirs were quite low. So, the Haw River is kind of the worst case, but have a planned scenario, since running out simply isn't an option.
Okay. Excuse me. John?
Just, yeah, the Haw River flows into Jordan Lake, and so that would be the very best place to get Haw River water. And Jordan Lake is very drought resistant, has a very large watershed. So I would think that our best preparation for future droughts would be to firm up our ability to get water from Jordan Lake, either through Durham or whatever other way we could do that. That's where the water is.
Yeah, staff would agree. So you can see Cane Creek Reservoir came online in 1989, and that's the reason why that big jump happens there. So our yield right now is about 10.5 million gallons per day. And you'll see that slight blip down in about 2025, and that's where we'll drain the existing quarry. The actively mined part, their permit, the special use permit for that goes through December 31, 2030, and that last 5 years, they will connect those two pits together so that we have one bigger hole in the ground. Since the quarry has no drainage area, we have to refill it with Cane Creek. So depending on how wet or dry weather is in 2030, but we're anticipating that by 2035, that quarry reservoir would be full, and that bumps our yield up to about 12.6 MGD. And this shows the actual demands on that. As you can see, from 1980 to about 2002, it was pretty easy to project what our demands were going to be. You could take a ruler and pretty much do that line. And then the drought of 2002 happened, and our demands dropped off and they never really came back up. We also began recycling water at our water treatment plant in that year. So we are using now about the same amount of water in terms of raw water that we were using back in the early 1990s. And I think that's, I've shown this graphic to other folks, like my counterparts in the region, and they're very impressed with that. So again, kudos to our customers on that. This is the drinking water plant, and the capacity of that is determined by our peak day. So we got to meet our peak day needs, so that determines our capacity. And you can see that that was increased in 2002 up to our current capacity of 20 MGD. And again, you see that same downward trend in the actual peak day demands. So our peak day demand was in 1999, I believe, fiscal year. And we put our increasing block rates in place in October of 2007, and reclaimed water went online in March of 2009. So those have both been important parts of having that peak day demand go down. All right, water line breaks. This is one that John Young sent an email on, I believe, yesterday, saying this was one he wanted to discuss a little bit further. So this one you do see monthly in your KPI report. So the blue, kind of that light blue, is our main breaks, and then the yellowish or orangish, I'm not sure what color it is on your TV there, is where the laterals and mains come together, and then the greens are contractor damage. That goal is based on AWWA benchmarking study. It's at 7. They update that benchmarking report periodically, and so our goal suddenly came down from 11 to 7. And part of that depends on who is reporting, so different utilities will report in different years. And part of that is also dependent on how do you interpret your data and what they're asking for and how you report that. However, we have set that goal at less than 7, and this is kind of a critical, I mean, it's a part of our key mission is providing reliable and quality water. We don't see any kind of trend, you know, an increase in the trends there of those breaks. But if this is something that you want to look at more closely, staff's recommendation would be that we come back in January with that KPI update to you and include it as part of that. So that's something for you to kind of mull over during the rest of this and give us guidance at the end during your discussion tonight. This is water system losses. A year ago, Mary Tiger had done a water audit, and at that point we said, well, we'll incorporate that information inside this annual report to you all. So we're looking at the real losses, which are ones that we can account for. So it's showing how much we cannot account for on that graphic there. So at a presentation, at an AWWA conference, they showed ranges up to 200 of gallons per connection per day is kind of in the normal range. What we've done is looked at this kind of validated audit process that they have in Georgia, and there were 188 of them, and that is a little bit over 50 on those losses. So we really are at the low end for utilities in terms of losses within our system. Moving on to wastewater, again, we're looking at the capacity of the plant, and the capacity of the wastewater plant is done on the maximum month. So you take each day's flow through the plant, and then you average those up, and then at the end of the year, you take that max month, and that is how our NPDES permit, it's how they look at compliance with our flow limit. And again, you can see that we had a couple in 1997, an expansion up to 12 MGD, and then most recently in 2007 up to 14.5, the current capacity. And again, you can see our peak was in 2000. Not quite the same downward trend that we've seen in the raw water supply or raw water demands and the water treatment peak day demands, but there is a little bit of a downward shift in that line. And reclaimed water, so it's based on our peak day pumping capacity, and that is about 3 MGD. In August of last year, we had our peak day of, I think it was 2.4. We have had conversations with UNC. They don't anticipate any increases, but if we had to, we could pretty cost effectively increase the capacity of that system to about 5.2 MGD. So these are the same key takeaway messages. Again, we're sitting pretty good here. Before the last board meeting, I had sent out an email to you, and our thought is that this report is now getting rather lengthy. It seems like we add to it every year, and it's now, I think, 53 pages, and I don't like to read that much. So anyway, we were talking internally. Staff would like to focus on trends that we see as strategic. While all of them that we presented in that report we believe are important, that there are many of them that you're either seeing through the KPI report that you're looking at monthly, or there are other reports such as the OWASA little topic summaries that we update on an annual basis, or there might be something else that we're looking at on an annual basis. And the biosolids, we would also recommend that rather than doing the annual report that we've been doing on terms of biosolids usage, that we do include it in here. I think it does make sense since it's so linked to the Mason Farm wastewater treatment plant trends, that we do include it in this report and kind of think about that holistically. The other question I had for you is that section at the beginning on OWASA's planning environment. I wanted to ask, was that useful to you, not useful to you? Were there parts of it that are there places that, some of it that you'd like an appendix, or would you like to just kind of throw out? So those are questions that I would love feedback from you all on. And with that, that was all I had, unless you have. And again, there's no formal vote that you all need this evening, but any guidance and feedback you provide. Welcome.
Are there any members of the public who wish to make comments or have questions? Seeing none, board members, feedback or questions? Jeff?
Ruth, just a couple of comments on the report. There's always a section on source water protection, and I think that's great. And we talk about our methodologies for that, some of the past reports. Then in the narrative following that, there's some comments on some testing we do, but we don't track data on the lake, or at least if you do, it doesn't come to the board, sort of the lake testing. And I just wonder, if we're not monitoring or tracking that as a KPI or some, my concern is over time we get complacent. I just wonder if we're missing a trend. So we're very data heavy on all the other topics, but the raw water supply is more qualitative, and it's just
And we do collect data on our lakes.
Yeah.
So our water treatment lab staff go out on a weekly basis and collect data on the algae that are in there. They look at it by species. They're also looking at kind of dissolved oxygen conductivity down, because that helps us determine how we
Right.
want to treat and which lake we want to draw from.
Right. I know it's happening. I just wondered if there's a trend out there that I'm not suggesting you do anything, but maybe there's some trends out there that we're not looking at that could be instructive if we're looking year over year. And I just think back to, and again, I don't know what was the origin, but we had our taste and smell issue this spring, and I just wonder if there's some trending analysis on the lakes that might be beneficial. So that's just a thought.
Yeah, and there is, just to also throw in there, we do work with, we're part of the Triangle Area Water Supply Monitoring Program, which is a group of local governments in the Triangle. And we fund U.S. Geological Survey to go out and do monitoring in our water supplies as well. So they do monitor on both our lakes, as well as Cane Creek upstream of the lake and Morgan Creek at Highway 54 upstream of University Lake. And they are getting ready to publish a trends report.
Oh, great.
So I will definitely share that with you all. So when that comes out, it's not ready. They do a lot of QA/QC on their reports, so
Sure.
I don't want to promise you a date on when I'll see that, but I will definitely make that
We can see
available
that.
to you as well.
Then just on the graph on interconnections on 3.36, I know that Chatham Interconnect is not large, and you do mention it in the text. I just wondered from sort of a regional communication standpoint, it might be nice to show the little Chatham bar there. I don't know, if I were Chatham, I'd feel left out.
Okay.
And then just one last comment, and I've made this before. When you look, I know we're a long way out from when we think we'll have to meet that lower total nitrogen standard out of Mason Farm. And I know the utility expected that to come in much earlier than it did. And at the time, we used that sort of tail end denitrification filter. I just would suggest to the staff and our engineering department out there that come 2024, I think it's very unlikely that that's going to be state-of-the-art equipment for that task or economically efficient for that task. So we know that's what we have, but as we look for planning and we look at our section on technology, I just recommend you look at some other options out there that I think are superior.
Russia?
Yeah, sorry for coming in late, but yeah, on that same point, I thought that looking at that, it looks like on your report that you'd look at it at 2022, and I thought that might be too late. Maybe just push it a year earlier.
John?
Ruth, I thought this is really an extremely helpful and thorough summary of things, and I'm really impressed that, you're looking at all the physical aspects of the system, the capacities, the lakes, et cetera, but also at the regulatory environment and how we're doing with both present and anticipated regulatory requirements that we'll have to meet. So I think it's a real credit to OWASA that you were scanning the horizon in all directions to watch out for any things that need to be taken care of. So I was very impressed by it.
Thank you. It's a group effort. There's a lot of people that contributed to that report, so.
And I would think the whole board feels that way about the report. How about the introductory part? Was that helpful to you all, or is that something that staff could leave out?
It was helpful for me, but I'm brand new on the board. If I was maybe the second or third year, but it was certainly helpful for me being new. And
Jeff?
I think, Ruth, just to respond to your questions, I found the planning environment part a nice refresher, even though I've been around for a while. But with regard to some of the other sections, some of the reports are duplicative with other things that we see regularly. So I think, things that we see every month, and it might make some sense for your efficiency, but just so long as we don't lose the data would be my opinion.
Okay. You sure?
I actually liked it, including it all, because it's nice to kind of look at it annually and just once a year. And I mean, yeah, I've scanned through parts that I was like, okay, I know this, don't need to spend every second on it. And so it didn't take that long for me to go through. It probably took a lot longer for you to make, though. That's the problem. So I mean, I can totally understand trying to minimizing where you can. And, so I don't even have really any comments on what if you want to go for shorter, that's fine with me. But I did like it the way it was. I had some other minor comments and questions, but I'll wait till we address, I guess.
Well, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Just on page 32, which is 3.11, minor thing, but I thought the Jordan Lake Partnership was called something else.
Oh, well, yeah, but that was made after this report went to
Okay.
print.
All right. I do recall some sort of donation thing, so I was like,
all
oh, I'll get Ruth on this one.
I'll donate, okay. Good call.
So the next paragraph though was what I really wanted to ask was, we were talking about climate change. And I was curious if you thought that the musty odor event thing that we had was at all related to climate change, where the incoming water was warmer, earlier. I mean, it's hard to judge anything on one thing, but I'm just
Right,
thinking
and causation is hard to
nail down,
see. I
right.
mean, it's a question that I have, like, will we have these taste and odor events more frequently?
Earlier.
Or,
right.
you know, we have very protected watersheds, and yet we still do get some high chlorophyll values, and, you know, will that happen more frequently? I think those are all good questions, and then well, what can we do about it? We do have very protected watersheds, so other than getting out in front, we are testing for the, you know, toxins and that kind of thing. But
So this kind of runs into Jeff's point earlier. It'd be great if we could trend some of that somehow. I would like to see that at least. I don't know if it's something that anybody else would care about, but I think it'd be useful information.
yeah, we'd have to somehow tease out whether, I mean, it's all,
Yeah, it's a complicated.
it's not just a simple plotting the graph and putting a line through it, so, yeah.
If,
I will add, though, that we are collecting some data that we haven't collected in the past, and I know we're using a contract lab for a lot of that information, so there might be some, you know, for MIB and Jasmine, you know, we are doing more routine, I think, weekly analysis on that, so I do think there maybe is an opportunity to include some of that in the future. You know, that was part of the action plan Todd Taylor and his team put together following, you know, the events this spring.
Two other little things. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Let's see, this was on page 36, source water, oh, same thing, source water productions, but I just was curious about the financial, so you have a bullet there, it says financial support for agricultural best managed practices. I don't remember anything about that, so just
Where
curious.
are you? I'm sorry, what,
3.15. It's the fourth bullet.
Okay, so that was before my time, so it was before your time. But yeah, we funded some agricultural best management practices out in the watersheds back in the 90s.
There is, for example, a dairy farm. Right, this sits right at the intersection of Stanford Road and Tier Road, an active dairy farm, and some of the funds that we provided to that farm, one of the Tier farms, funded the construction of impoundments between the barn and the creek that runs into the reservoir that are in the nature of, obviously they're filtration ponds to stop some of the waste that would otherwise flow directly into the creek. I don't remember that we did that more than over maybe a 5 or a 6 or 7 year period. And I don't remember grants that we made to other farms. Do you, Ed, other than?
I don't recall any recent over the last decade. I think those are more in the area.
Once they were put into place, they are stabilized. We look at them every time we fly over it.
So do we still, so it sounds like we don't do that anymore.
We don't make the grants anymore, but the structures are in place and doing their job.
I'm just thinking about, and I don't know if this is this may have been in the closed session, so I can't remember. I'll have to ask later about something I have a question on.
Okay.
Okay, anyone else on the board? Okay, hearing no more questions, thank you, Ruth.
So my question though is, I heard.
I don't think
competing-
you got out of the much.
Okay, so do the full report. Got it.
Okay. Bad news is,
That's all right.
good news, you get to sit down. All right, thank you, Ruth. Item number 4, discuss revisions to maternity, paternity leave. Stephanie Glasgow, Director of Human Resources and Safety.
Thank you. So our current policy supports our employees and their families by providing maternity, paternity benefits to employees that are full-time and have completed 1 year of service. Females are eligible for 6 weeks of paid leave, and males are eligible for 3 weeks of paid leave at the birth or adoption of a child under the age of 12 months. So staff believes that this policy should be updated to remain fair and unbiased in the application of the policy and to provide the same benefits for females and males, and essentially calling it a parental leave policy. The Human Resource Committee and staff recommend providing 6 weeks of paid leave to males and females for the birth, adoption, foster care, or guardianship of a child below the age of 18. Your packet does include information from other area entities, and it shows that most of these entities have or are making this change. If the board agrees to the change, it will help us remain competitive in the local market. Additional information is provided in your agenda material, and it does include specific language changes to the HR policy. And I stand by ready to answer any questions that you might have.
Is there anyone in the public who has any questions or comments on this? Seeing none, board members, comments or questions? Ray?
I'm assuming that this parental leave is in addition to any accrued vacation
Yes,
or sick leave. I don't know whether that
yes,
applies. But an employee can take an additional leave if they want to extend
absolutely.
their leave for having babies.
Family and Medical Leave Act itself allows an employee 12 weeks of leave paid or unpaid for such qualifying event.
Okay. I fully support it. I think it's a good idea.
Okay. Bashir?
Could you give a brief overview on what the, how much vacation time is accrued and sick time is accrued annually? Is it different per different classes, or?
It is. Hold, let me
Okay.
grab my book.
Maybe just
I'll start
like-
with sick leave and tell you that each employee earns 8 hours a month of sick leave, and that does not change over time with your length of service.
Okay.
And I want to make sure I get it absolutely right. For annual leave, the different tiers.
So would they be able to use sick leave as, or is that not, I mean, there wouldn't really be, so that's what I'm not sure about, is if they're not really sick, if they're taking care of a child, would that be, or would that be allowed?
They would be allowed to use sick leave
Okay.
to extend beyond the paid parental leave.
Okay,
Yes.
all right,
And so when an employee comes to work from 0 to 4 years, they earn 12 days per year of annual leave. 5 to 9 is 15, 10 to 14 is 18, 15 to 19 is 21, and 20 plus is 27.
okay, all right, thanks.
Any other questions? Yinka?
Yeah, okay, so not related to this, but related to a question about the leaves. Is sick leave, when you accrue it, is it on an annual use it or lose it, or do you get to roll it over?
Okay, you get to roll it over, and it's basically the retirement system dictates that. So for every 20 days of sick leave that you have at the time of retirement, it's considered one credit with the retirement system. So if you don't use your sick leave and you continue to accumulate it, the retirement system takes that as time in service.
Is that the same with the vacation as well?
No, it is not.
Okay.
So 240 hours is the maximum that you can have on December 31st for annual leave.
Can you roll annual leave into sick leave?
Anything over that, you can roll into sick leave. You need to use it, or roll it over.
Okay. Any other questions? Do I have a motion to adopt the resolution updating maternity paternity leave to parental leave?
So moved.
First by Ray, second by John. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Okay, the motion passes.
We appreciate it very much.
Thank you. Let's go to item number 5, discuss financial reserve policy. Stephen Winters, the Finance Director and Customer Service Director, will make a presentation.
Thank you. I just have a few comments, and the rest of the material is in your packet. So we have a financial management policy that's a board-approved financial management policy, and that policy includes stipulations for our reserves. It sets minimum targets for 3 different categories. The reserves are not restricted in any way. The board can decide to use the funds in those for the purposes that they've been set aside for, or for any other lawful purpose. They're not legally restricted. The purpose of it is to help with our financial stability and sustainability, and to help cover for unexpected expenditures, either for capital improvements projects or operating expenses, or any unexpected reductions in revenue. Part of the purpose is to keep us from, if we're short this year, we have to raise rates. Next year, we're too much. Now we can lower rates. It's also a buffer, to help guard against rate swings like that. On page 5.2, there are just some examples that we provided of things that might come about that would fall into the categories that I just mentioned. 1 or 2 of those we've actually experienced. There was a capital improvements project that we thought was going to be not very much money, that ended up being a lot of money a few years ago once we got into it. So the reserves are set aside for those types of things. The purpose of the discussion before you tonight is to decide, or to discuss whether the minimum targets that are in the financial policy are you comfortable with. You may recall, because also in the packet there's a graph that shows that we actually have more on hand than the minimum targets. That's kind of a separate discussion. The discussion now is, do you think that the 3 reserves we have in there and the total that it calls for is appropriate for the organization? Most of the literature on utilities that talks about reserves make it a point to point out that it's unique to each utility, the financial situation of the utility and other things, size and all that sort of thing. So while you can benchmark it to other organizations, it's not it's not always all that useful of a benchmark. However, the ratings agencies that give us our bond agencies, they do have some criteria for various things, and one of the criteria I've listed in the packet here is the reserves as measured by something that's called days cash on hand. And essentially what that means is how much money you have in reserves, how long would you be able to pay your operating expenses if you didn't bring any more revenue in. And based on our minimum targets, that number would be 325 days. So if for whatever reason the money stopped coming in tomorrow, we could still operate the organization for another close to a year. And what Fitch Ratings says is that a utility with 365 days cash on hand is considered to be, in their terms, strong, good. And one that had half of that, or 6 months of days cash on hand, would be considered kind of mid-range. So at 325, we're close to the thing that they would call strong. So we're in good shape, but we're not outside that parameter. Excuse me. So that's the only comments that I had. Questions from you guys?
Do we have any questions from anybody in the public or comments? Open it up to the board members. Think Jeff and then Rashir.
So, Stephen, thank you for the summary and the risk assessment. But I guess I disagree with you that this is separate from the discussion of the fact that we are over the 19.5. And I think this discussion we've been having as a board with you and staff for the last couple of years centers on the term that you use, minimum targets. And I think there's a lack of common understanding. Because to me, that you have personally, I think the justification for the 19.5 reserve looks pretty solid, well thought out. I feel comfortable with it. Okay, but I view, and I guess I would like to better understand that as a target, right? So if our target, without the word minimum, is 19.5, then I would expect sometimes you'd show me, oh, we're at 18.7, sometimes we're at 20.2, but we don't operate that way. And maybe that's appropriate, but I think that's the conversation we haven't been having. And because I think, and maybe we should be, but perhaps because I think many on the board are thinking of that as a target, and you're thinking of it more of a floor you want to stay away from, which is, I think, why we're not necessarily coming to a consensus on where we are. I mean, am I correct in my characterization? You're kind of looking at that 19.5 and making sure you stay comfortably away from it?
No, if I led that, given that impression by saying minimum targets, that was not intentional. It is the balance that we ought to have, that we say we should have on hand to protect our sustainability and all of that. We have not, purposefully, we, and I'm including the board in that, over collected to have, the funds we have on now. I mean, that kind of came about as circumstances, and I can go into some of that if you care to, but no, I would agree with your characterization that it's a target. Perhaps I shouldn't have used the word minimum, and they will ought to be somewhere in the neighborhood of that 19,
right.
Whatever.
So then, okay, so I think if this wanted to get that common understanding, and then I would say, what I've seen over the last couple of quarters is we're kind of, gliding down from above that towards the target, which I think is appropriate. I don't think, a drastic move to get there, but I just wanted to make sure I understood where we were going, and I'm comfortable with the fact that we are gliding down towards that target. I just want to understand, so thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just, if I can follow up on that just real quickly, we have some that have been on the board longer will recall that we've said that, well, in 2 years, we expect to be no more at the targets. We said that for a few years now, and that hasn't happened. And Vishnu and the rest of his CIP team have left the room, so I'm not as quite awkward about saying this as when they're in the room. But, a big part of it is that we have underspent, a capital improvements project to, in some years, some significant degrees. So that's kind of delayed what we had projected.
Rashir, I have a follow-up question. Does the 19 million translate into 325?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Rashir?
Yeah, I was getting to that, 325. Would our rating go up if we had 365?
I doubt it. For an organization like ours, AA plus is one of the highest you can get, or probably the highest that I know of. You'll see some AAA rated organizations, but they're usually associated with municipalities that have the ability to do general obligation bonds, where we're only allowed to do revenue bonds. So they've got the backing of taxing authority as well. So I don't think going to 365 would not do that, and I wouldn't advocate that we even tried. I think that would be more than what would be necessary and would be a burden on the ratepayers that's just not necessary.
So there's really, you don't see a real avenue to get to AAA?
No.
Okay.
Any other question by board members? Okay. Any specific guidance you're seeking from tonight?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm on the same page as the opinions or view that Jeff spoke about, and if everybody else is okay with that, I think we're good for now anyway.
Okay. Thank you very much, Steve.
Thank you.
Okay. Next item is number 6, review work board schedule. Are there any requests by board committees, board members, or staff for items to be placed on the schedule. John?
Thank you. One issue I wanted to bring up was water line breaks, and specifically the sediment that can come out and get into creeks. You know, this water's under high pressure. When the line breaks, it scours out a lot of soil, which can get into creeks, depending on where what the terrain is like. So I experienced one of these in my front yard a few days ago when a line broke on Kensington Drive, and the people from OWASA came over and turned off the water, and there was some public concern about this because the sediment went into Eastwood Lake, which is a recreational lake, you know, just downstream there that Booker Creek goes into. So the people who were associated with the lake had some questions about how quickly the leak was cut off, and the OWASA staff put some, I think they call them wattles. I wasn't sure what the proper term was, but these are blockages that are put around storm sewers that divert this water away from the storm sewer and can keep sediment from getting into creeks. So there's some questions about how long it took to put those into place. So I guess a few years ago, I happened to be walking down by Bowling Creek, and I saw a tremendous amount of sediment coming into the creek, and that turned out to be a water line break on Pritchard Avenue, which had come under some various culverts and so forth and gotten into Bowling Creek. And there was quite a bit of sediment that got into the creek at that point. So I understand that after this recent break, I think I understand that OWASA staff met with the town of Chapel Hill and went over some procedures that could be used to respond in the most effective way. So, you know, it's inevitable that there are going to be water line breaks from time to time. I think it's worth the board giving a little attention to what is the best way that OWASA can be prepared to react quickly to turn off the water, and then to, through the use of these wattles or other techniques, to divert as much of that sediment away from creeks as possible. So I guess I would suggest that we have a report at an upcoming board meeting that would perhaps, you know, go over what our emergency response procedures are and determine if we're doing the best we can do on that.
Okay. Got the consensus of the board?
And I support that, definitely.
Okay. Yeah.
I've got one more. If I
One
could.
more? Okay.
So on the new meters that we're planning to put in, you know, we've heard that some people have concern about the radio frequency radiation. And I talked to Steve Winters about this before the recent meetings, and he was very helpful in putting into the agenda package and also putting up on our screen a comparative chart that showed how much radiation comes from the meters versus other sources like microwave ovens, Wi-Fi, ordinary radio and TV broadcast, and so forth. And I've also had a very good conversation with John Young about this, and John had some good ideas. And so the approach that we think would be good would be to pick a small number of sources of radio frequency radiation, you know, things that people are commonly exposed to, microwave ovens, radio and TV broadcasts, Wi-Fi, et cetera, and then, you know, compare that to our meters. And I think that we should show both instantaneous exposure and average daily cumulative exposure. Both of those are important. And so we've got a good start on that, but I think we need to do a little bit more to have something that would be accurate and understandable to the public. I think this is one area that we can really quantify, and I think many of our customers will be, a lot of customers aren't even aware of an issue about radio frequency radiation. And I think those that are, I think many of those would be very reassured when they see that the meter that's 30 feet from the house or more and only on for half a second a day, that's an extremely minimal exposure. So I think with a little bit more work, we can have something that's very convincing. And I guess I would request that from time to time, the staff update us on how they're coming along with that analysis and, give us a look at what they're coming up with so that we can know what we're saying to the customers.
Ed, do you know when that might be complete?
Hi,
Hi,
goodness.
this is Mary Tiger.
Mary Tiger, Sustainability Manager, and also managing communications for the AMI. So we've been working on kind of our sub-communication strategy for the fee that you all approved at your last meeting. So around that, the option for opting out. And so we will be getting back to the board soon with our strategy for that, and it will include information about, how we communicate about the risks and where and how. So look forward to that.
Okay, I would just request that as you're working on that, you either through emails or at meetings, let us know how you're developing that graphic information and what it looks like, so that if we have any questions, we can come back to you before it actually goes out. Thank you.
We will.
Jeff?
So on the 12-month, I'm not for you, Mary, sorry. For the 12-month calendar, at the last meeting, I asked that we put something on there to update the board on the risk assessment activity. So I was happy to see it's in there tentatively for January. Just had a quick question. I don't know for whom, maybe Todd. Just I don't need a summary, but is work on that assessment ongoing, and we'll be getting an update in January, or has it just maybe a 30-second or however long is appropriate update on how that's going?
Hi, Adam Haggerty, Asset Management and Facilities Engineer, and I'm the project manager for the risk assessment project. And kind of give you a brief update. This week, we actually started the risk assessment at the wastewater treatment plant, and today is actually day 4 of that process. So it's been very productive. Seems like we got a lot of good buy-in from everybody, and a lot of progress has been made. We're going to be starting the water treatment plant risk assessment on the 27th of November, which is the week of Thanksgiving week. And we're going to do 3 days that week, and then another 2 days the following week, Tuesday and Wednesday. And then we have several other meetings and stuff. That's kind of where we're at in the process right now. So.
Well, thanks, Adam. I'm glad to hear that's moving along. Looking forward to the summary in January. One of the things I'll almost certainly ask you at the January meeting is from whatever assessment we've done, how is that flowing into our decisions on the next year's budget for operating and capital expenditure? I mean, now that'll flow in there, but just a little bit of a, I'll probably ask that verbatim. So now you're ready.
Yeah, absolutely.
Adam, I'm sorry. Bob?
Yeah.
So you might explain that in the January work session, that's not going to be a preview of the final report.
Right.
That's, I think, in a June meeting. So how about just a quick overview of what would be part of the January discussion with the board about that work?
We'd be kind of discussing the project, kind of an overview of the project, methodology we'll be doing, kind of our schedule, our timeline, the tasks we've completed, the tasks that we still have ongoing.
And we will have our consultant.
And our consultant
here.
That makes sense. I'm jumping the gun on the schedule, and I understand. Thank you, Ed.
I'm glad you all are interested in this project. I'm very interested, and I appreciate your engagement. Anyone else?
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Any staff
requests? No.
Requests?
No, thank you.
Okay, Ed, how are we coming on the training sessions with Visions?
Andy is passing out the results of some of the recent doodle poll. First, and there's 2 different tasks we need to schedule. The one that's time sensitive is getting your participation in the focus group meetings. And Angela Bryant with Visions suggested those be set up in 2 or 3 board member groups. And again, there is some time sensitivity to that, because we definitely want your input along with the employees' input as part of the organizational assessment. So, and if we just haven't found a date that works for everyone, I know Angela said, while it's not preferred, she's happy to have a phone conversation one-on-one, to collect information from you. So what Andy distributed on one side is the doodle poll for the focus group session. So, and I know we don't have all members here tonight, but if we can, wrap this up, what dates will and will not work, and if we simply don't have a date and a time offered that works for you, then let Andy or let me or Stephanie know, because what we'll do then is arrange with Angela or Thomas Griggs, a phone conversation, just a one-on-one phone conversation to collect that information. So first we ask your help in getting that scheduled. And then the other thing you were polled about initially with 3 dates, and then we added 3 more dates, is the 4 or 5 hour training session that the board said that you'd like to have with Visions. And I know you'd really enjoy it. I know our team has. And unfortunately, we haven't found a date yet where all 9 of you can make it. There is not time sensitivity to this. So if we need to move into next calendar year and find some more dates and find one that works for all of you, just let us know tonight or soon, and we'll just reschedule and look for other dates next calendar year. So again, no time sensitivity on the training. It's, at your pleasure, but there is time sensitivity to get your input as part of the focus group sessions.
Is that what the 2 Thursday nights is for the focus group discussions?
Well, there were different dates for different groups of you. On one, if you're on the side of the page that says doodle results for focus group sessions, there was one group, Angela proposed Yinka, Barbara, Ruchir for November 15th. That's a Wednesday, 4:30 to 5:45, and then Bob Morgan, Jeff, John, and Ray on Wednesday, 15th. 4:30 to 5:45, and that's with, one's with Angela, one's with Thomas Griggs, and then there's John Morris and Heather group on Thursday, November 16th.
I can't make any of those focus group dates, unfortunately. I'm out of town.
I'm also out of town all of next week, but if I can schedule a phone call,
okay,
that would be helpful.
Well, with the first one then, so Yinka and Barbara, you're still good for that time to meet with Angela?
I see Barbara put that she could do it at 5.
Okay.
And what time would it end?
You need to be done by 6, right?
I'd need to be done by, let's say 6:20.
Okay. So I think that's perfect. So Barbara, you and Yinka will start at 5, and then Ruchir, we'll work with you and with Angela or Thomas just to arrange a phone conversation sometime in the next week or so. Would that be all right?
Yeah, looks like both Jeff and I are out next week, so.
Okay. Yeah, and then so for the next group, it looks like we have a couple dates that work for Ray and John, right? And then we need to, and Bob, those dates that didn't work for you either, right? So why don't you move over to that group on the 16th? And do you all want to, let's see, well, Heather preferred the 6 to 7:15, so.
That's fine.
So we have John, Heather. You're in a HR committee meeting on the 16th. I just heard.
Well, we'll have to, I'd rather get this out of the way.
Okay, yeah, that, you're of course ex officio, so.
I'm an ex officio.
Okay. All right, so the time for that session will be Thursday, November 16th, 6 to approximately 7:15, and John Morris, Heather, and Bob Morgan. So. Yes, that, well, it might be a different room, but it'll be in, yeah, it'll be here, and we'll let you know. Okay, so that leaves John and Ray. Looks like you're both fine with either time. Ray, do you have a preference?
No, but I mean, if it's 4 to a group, why don't we just join Barbara and Yinka?
Well, I can't speak for Angela, but I think she preferred a little smaller 2 to 3 person
Oh, okay. Well,
group.
Either one, either one.
So why don't we go with the earlier time if, since both you and John said that would work? 4:30 to 5:45 on Wednesday, November 15th? Yes, there's Thomas Griggs and Angela Bryan, 2 different, yeah. And then Jeff, like Ruchir, will just work with you and try to find a time you can have a phone conversation. And if it worked where you both could do it at the same time, you know, we could conference call you guys, right?
Great.
All right, perfect. And would the board like us to, would you like to consider one of the 6 dates, November 11th through December 21st, or would you prefer we stretch out into next calendar year and try again for your 4 or 5 hour training session with Visions?
Well, I double checked my calendar and I could make, I don't know why I excluded the 30th, but I don't see anything on the 30th. So.
Yeah, well, that would make everybody but
Barbara.
Barbara.
November 30th.
Yeah, Thursday, November 30, 5:30 to about 9:30, and we'll feed you. So we have a winner? Awesome. That's, well, excellent. So, so November 30th at 5:30 here at OWASA, and we'll make sure there's a meal. Oh, that's excellent. Good.
Thank you all. Ed, you want to go over the December 14th meeting?
Yes. So there's a couple tentatives on there. What's on agenda page 6.2 was appointing the audit firm. You received an email earlier this week from Stephen suggesting that we delay that until the January meeting because we want to seek a little stronger response than we received. So without objection, you know, that matter will be at your January work session. The HR committee, as Barbara announced, is discussing employee compensation. So, you know, assuming all goes well with that discussion, the committee will bring forth an option or two for the full board's discussion. We are working hard to bring you information regarding the new state law as it impacts our connection fees, which we currently call service availability fees, the one-time upfront fee for new connections. And it's also tentative. I still don't know when the Orange County will complete their after-action review on strategic communications during the emergency. So assuming that information is available, then that'll be on the agenda. The board previously said you'd like to wait until you had the benefit of that information before discussing that topic. And since, you know, we'll meet, I guess, in December, that key focus areas, I think that's going to be popped to the next meeting in January as well. And also in there is the January 11th, and some of the things I just mentioned will move over to January 11th. And
just make sure we add the closed session on the 14th.
Yes, and what was there is typically after I meet with you all in closed session, then I propose for the coming year, you know, the key focus areas for me and the team. So since we won't complete that closed session until December 14th, that item on key focus areas, I suggest move to the January 11th meeting,
that'd be
if
fine.
that's okay.
Yeah.
And on the 12-month schedule, I mentioned earlier the moving the audit firm from December 14th to January 11th.
I think the key focus area kind of discussion should maybe come after we have a chance to talk. Otherwise, Or how, what is that key focus area again? Sorry, say that again. What is that discussion?
Last year, for the first time, there was feedback from the board that rather than having a 20-page document of performance expectations, that rather, for me, it would be broken down into a smaller number of key focus area for the year. So, you know, this year was the first time we used that format, and if the board wishes to continue with that, typically, last year, what I did after we met in closed session and had the benefit of that feedback, you know, I proposed what the key focus areas would be, you know, for the coming year for me.
Oh, okay.
And then that would be discussed in this kind of setting in January. And then once I had the benefit of your feedback, you know, I would finalize that document and distribute it, so.
Okay.
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 Okay. 12-month calendar, do you have any discussion?
Nothing else other than what I already mentioned.
Okay. Any comments from the board or questions from the board? Okay. Any comments from the public on the calendar? None. Ed, would you like to give us the summary of the work session items, please?
Yeah, some of the key action items will, and some of these are relatively minor, but we take notes and act on them as, like the suggestion about adjusting the scale on the financial report, a couple graphs. It was agenda page 2.6. You agreed that when we discussed the key performance indicators report on January 11th, we'll focus on some of the water main break data, and we really are pleased that you're engaged in that report. I think it's really, really important. We'll, of course, consider all the comments we received tonight regarding the strategic trends report, and I know Ruth's looking forward to another robust report next year. We'll report.
Geez, all right.
She cheered.
We'll prepare a report on our measures to manage sediment resulting from water main breaks for discussion at a future board meeting. Todd Taylor and his team will have the lead on that. And as you heard just a minute ago, that will also provide you a report on our communication strategy as it pertains to those customers that may be considering opting out. Or I should say, you know, the manual read option for that. So that's what I have.
Okay. Any comments on that? Hearing that, I believe we're at the end of our agenda. So if there's no objections, we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you. And the crowd goes wild.
Wow.
I don't know what button I hit, but it.